light X-rays on up to gamma rays, where the sight of science then ends, and where that unknown terms of infinite frequency begins. Cosmic rays, which would think would be at the electromagnetic spectrum, we are told, are really sublight speed particles, even though a 10 hertz electromagnetic field that would travel through endless vacuum of space would still be travel at the velocity c. So if you see sound on an old electromagnetic spectrum chart, then your old chart must be wrong. We have been told that sound is perceived as a pressure, not electromagnetic radiation. Sound cannot be transmitted in a vacuum, so that is why you should not find sound on an electromagnetic spectrum chart. Sound is transmitted by air, solid fluids, or something that must have mass to compress. But again, pressure or sound is something we cannot perceive until we first touched, just like the whatever it is that we call light. We can feel sound because of its pressure that causes something to move, but we cannot feel light unless it first absorbed by the resultant heat of what we call energy of light. So what we refer as to light before it becomes light is really something cannot be cannot see or sense unless we absorb it in some way first. It is different than sound, of course, since light does not need any mass to continue on its path or to propagate. This thing that science tells us is that electromagnetic waves, or whatever it is, can pass through empty vacuum of space as radio waves, light, X rays, and gamma rays, where sight of science ends. So how does light propagate or travel through infinite vacuum or emptiness of space? Science is shrewd with its answers since science tells us it is nothing. And this is what I was talking about. This plane field here would be like an oscilloscope. And this line here now with this wheel and what we're working on is this would be below ground surface. So this would be the flow, the frequency, the peak, the bottom peak of the transverse wave, okay? So this is above ground wave, which where we would have the wave traveling. Down here would be the electromagnetic wave traveling. And this is where we combined ground power with air power. Transverse wave of both electric and magnetic energy. So if you could see this transverse wave of whatever it is, how it would perceive it. How about a wave that something that turns into nothing and back into something again? There goes your wave, electromagnetic and electric. How about a wave of something that turns into nothing and back into something again? That is, of course, if you could slice it in half and only look along and through one plane that it travels in space. If you could perceive the whole thing, science has told us we would then see an electric field running perpendicular to a magnetic field in some direction. So basically, here's your 90-degree offsets, okay? And velocity, obviously your arrow is going that way, so everything is in the right hand twist heading this way. Wouldn't it be interesting if science would one day tell us this transition is of nothing was really something instead? Maybe science has already told us in their own roundabout way. Since science has told us it all travels along the unit directionally vector of time you see it. So here we go with Einstein. We're going to bring in time. Every even the thing we call gravity is a different beast. We have been told that gravity seems to like to stay in one place. In fact, no one knows what gravity is, but there are many theories of how it works. Ed had even had a theory about gravity that he told us about in one of his papers that I read to you guys. But regardless of all the theories, we all know what I it can do. Try lifting a rock sometime and then you will see why gravity is sometimes referred as something like sticky glue. You first need to exceed the gravitational forces of weight, friction, or inertia of rock before it will first start to move. Since it is at rest, or some say asleep, once you can do that, and if you could lift it high enough, like a rocket, it would then break away from the gravity field of the Earth. In a sense, it would be like a free body then. It would continue to travel through space. In a way, it's same kind of effect you would experience if you were to try to separate two magnets apart. The difference is that with magnets, you can turn one magnet around and then they would simply push apart. Too bad we can't do this thing with the rock. Or can we? If you could make a rock float, it would be easy and quick to move it around. Would you agree? So let's say you could take a rock and make it weightless. Did you ever wonder what would you see? Since it still has mass, it would it it start to float on its own, or would it need to give a push to start it's on its way? If a rock became completely weightless, would you would you need to be careful on which side of it you would choose to stand? Yeah, you need to leave a little weight so this way you can control the weightless rock. So that's me saying that. So if the Earth spins towards the dawn and the horizon in the east, a weightless rock would just rise up, would surely appear to move towards the west. So it might be good choice to stand to the rock's east, but isn't strange Leedskalnin tells us to stand in the west instead. In any event, the reason why you would need to be careful with a weightless rock is that it would become dangerous when we would move it. A lot of mass, even at slow velocity, would still contain a lot of momentum to stop. It could be the same as being crushed by a rock falling on you due to some low level of gravity. So if you could get a rock to completely be weightless, it would be it would in fact be dangerous to control. It would be better if it was not completely weightless. A little bit of gravity would act like a light chain attached to the rock to make it easier to handle. So let's see if the interesting thing that happens when you crack a magnet in half and its equator. If you could break one in half and try to put it together, would it not push apart? Yes, it does push apart. It creates its own poles in the broken section. It would seem that something happened at the crack in the magnet equator to make the repel instead